It's great because he's always wanted to be on a team, be involved.
Glad that we have now a team that meets the children with special needs.
To give them the opportunity to play with other kids is fun and exciting. Every game is fun and exciting, and just seeing the smiles on their faces, yeah, it's enjoyable.
You know, this is just an adaptive team that he's able to also interact with children with other special needs, and it just at his pace, at his level. And so without any, there's competition, but it's also fun competition.
It was the first opportunity for him to have a game and be on the team.
In the past 6 years of working here, this has been the best thing that I've been a part of. I mean, to come out here and watch these kids and be a part of it, it's so much bigger than the recreation department. I mean, we're giving these kids memories that they are going to have forever. You watch these kids and they're having a good time and they're laughing and it's just pure joy for them, and they're really genuine.
Could we all sit down so we can get this meeting started, please?
He's usually on Amazon, eBay.
Good morning, everyone. We will start the meeting off today with a chaplain prayer by Ralph Dawkins, our police department chaplain. Would you please come forward and lead us in prayer?
Good morning, everyone. If you would bow your head with a word of prayer with me, if you would, please. Father, I pray for those who are in authority over this city. I pray and lift up the mayor, her staff, and the assistants, the city council, the city manager, and every person and department that is instrumental in leading and directing our city. I pray that you would bless them to work together in unity to tackle the items that are on the agenda today, that you will keep division from among them. And I pray that you would give them godly wisdom, give them directions and instructions on how to lead, manage, and operate this city and all of its departments. I pray that you would give these leaders knowledge and guidance on how to deal with drugs, violence, crime, and any other problems that are facing our city and its people. I pray for the police chief and the police force, the city council, the city fire chief, and the fire department, and all of the first responders who serve our city. Lastly, I pray that you would bless our city with economic prosperity. May you draw in and attract to our city industry, businesses, corporations that will produce jobs and revenue and help our city to grow and prosper. I commit all of these things concerning our city unto you, Lord. And regardless of how things may look in the natural, I confess that you, your word, and you are over our city, and you are well able to bring to pass everything that we have prayed for in the city council meeting. It is in Jesus' name we pray. Amen and amen. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Blessings.
And today we have Peyton Behrens. Would you come forward, please, and lead us in prayer? We're glad to have you today. And you go to Fort Concho? Yes. Fantastic. Okay, well, we're going to turn this way, and there's our flag. So I'm going to put my hand over my heart, and you're going to lead us. Okay? Let's go.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible,
today we will be doing the proclamation of December 7th, 2019 as Concho Christmas Celebration Day. So Lee, would you come forward? "2019 marks the 26th anniversary of Concho Christmas Celebration's annual Tour of Lights. The celebration, with over 3 million lights, is one of the largest Christmas lighting events in the state of Texas. The event offers a 2.5-mile walking or driving tour beginning behind the main post office on the corner of Abe Street and First Street and ending at El Paseo de Santa Angela. Hundreds of community volunteers greet tour guests, inmates from the Department of Corrections assist with installation of Christmas scenes, the members of the San Angelo Restaurant Association supply meals to the inmates, and the RSVP volunteers deliver the inmates' meals. The community Christmas tree lighting ceremony will be held Saturday, December 7th, 2019 at 5:15 p.m. at the corner of South Chadbourn and West Concho Avenue. Activities will include the San Angelo Community Band conducted by Dr. Constance Kelly of San Angelo State University and the Twin Mountain Tonesmans directed by Mark Clark. The community tree lighting will be followed by the 18th Annual Lights of Christmas Parade at 6 p.m., which may be viewed on Chadbourn between 4th Street and Concho Avenue, on Concho Avenue between Chadbourn and Oaks, on Oaks back to 2nd Street. The Tour of Lights can be seen Sunday through Thursday from 6 to 10 p.m. and each Friday and Saturday from 6 p.m. to midnight, December 7th through December 31st, 2019. Therefore, I, Brenda Gunter, Mayor of the City of San Angelo, Texas, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby declare Saturday, December the 7th, 2019, as Concho Christmas Celebration Day, and encourage citizens to join the activities and view the magnificent holiday lights that have become a community treasure. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you.
Thank you, and would you like to offer some words? Please.
Thank you. Mayor, Council, thank you so much for honoring the 400-plus community volunteers who, now going on 26 years, have brought the joy of Christmas to our community. Merry Christmas. Thank you.
We will now open the meeting for public comment. If you have a public comment item, please state your name and address or SMD. Each citizen can speak just once per item unless asked to comment by council. Public comment is 3 minutes unless extended by council or translation services. A proponent-opponent also has 5 minutes unless extended by council or translation services. Council has no obligation to respond to comments or questions from the public. Any response from a member of the City Council to non-agenda comments is limited to a statement of specific factual information, recitation of existing policy, and directing staff to place a subject on a future agenda. With that, do we have anyone in the audience today who would like to make public comment? Please come forward.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Buenos días.
You want to pull the microphone down just a bit. There you go.
I'm a short person.
It's okay.
My name is Gregorio Gutierrez. I'm living here in San Angelo. I'm the citizen to this community. Recently, Conexión San Angelo, the Lingo newspaper, remittance or sending to yours to the letter about to the local situation happen in the central avenues like to Bryan and other street crossing through the west to east. Example, the more concern to us, I speak with yours, with a father, with a grandfather, and part to this community. I'm worried for the future leaders, which is the sons and the students, and specifically to the Central High School. Every day, taking to the break and crossing to the street in North Bryan, going through, taking the meals for McDonald's. So it's high risk crossing every day. Basically, recently, saw the accident to the student from the Central High School. So it's in my opinion, I invest in millions of dollars annually for repair to the streets, but it's more important care and protect to the life for the future leaders. The present time is students, but remember, it's family members. So this is my comments today.
Thank you very much. Do I have further public comment? With no further public comment, we will close this section of the agenda today, and we will move on to Lucy has an announcement that she would like to make before we go into the consent agenda.
Yes, there's going to be a free Thanksgiving luncheon on November the 28th from 11 to 4 at the Neighbors Cafe located at Rust Ministry. This is their second annual Thanksgiving feast, and it's hosted by El Puro Loco owner Jesse Noriega, and he invites everyone to come out there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we will move into the consent agenda. And to start with, we are going to pull item D and move it to the regular agenda. Does council have any other items they'd like to pull, starting with Tommy?
No, ma'am.
Tom?
None to pull, but I will recuse myself from item C.
Okay. Harry?
No, ma'am.
Lucy?
No, ma'am.
Lane? Billy?
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to pull item B and item F.
And I'm going to pull item H. With that, we will take a vote on the balance of the consent agenda, which would be voting on items A, item C, item E, item G. Do I have a motion to approve the items I've just listed?
So moved.
By Billy, moved and seconded by? Second. By Lane. Any public comment on those agenda items? With none, we will take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, those items are approved from the consent agenda. We will go to item B, consider awarding RFQ ES-06-19 for professional services to the 17 firms submitting qualifications, including scope of services related to public works projects, including surveying, schematic, environmental documents, plan specification, estimates, PS&E, and related documents, not limited to streets, water, and sewer utilities, and that require completion in a time-sensitive manner to the responsive engineering firms, and authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute all related documents. Lance, you're up here already. Good. Billy, do you have questions?
I do. A couple of questions to begin with, Lance. To my knowledge, this is the first time I've seen us addressing a request for quotes from 17 firms at one time. So as I read this, my first question was, what does IDIQ stand for? And then my second question is, why are we doing it this way?
So to give you the background on that, Mr. Witt, is back when we started the original bond releases for the street funds, we actually had a request for qualifications similar to this, and we set up an IDIQ, which is indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity. And what that basically means is that there is no necessarily guarantee that anybody will have a project. The projects will be released as funds are available. And we set that up initially with a $3 million budget, and that was to design all of the streets and road repairs to match what the bond funding is. And we had 10 firms that were actually put in on the first one. And that IDIQ contract reached its capacity limits as well as a time frame, and so that contract is gone. And so what this is now doing is it's replacing that original one. And what it allows us to do is, rather than every time we have a project going through the bid process for every single project that we're doing in the streets and the capital improvements, we have developed a qualification list. And so we have actually gone through and qualified all these different firms for what their abilities are, whether they specialize in water and sewer, whether they specialize in roadway, or whether they have other professional services that the city might need. And we have developed this list so that not only can Public Works use it, but the way it's structured, any department in the city can use this contract. And so as we're moving forward, if there is a need for engineering services, they can look on this list. If they find someone that meets the qualifications, they can actually contact them, ask them if they have the abilities time-wise, and then actually then negotiate and get a quote from them directly and issue a task order. And so it simplifies the time frame, it simplifies the process, and then also too, because of the way it's structured, it would follow the normal purchasing guidelines. So if it's less than $25,000, it would be a director level. If it reaches that $49,900, it goes to Mr. Valenzuela, and then anything over that would then come to council for you guys' approval, project by project.
Okay, all right. So anything under the 50,000 would not necessarily come to council, but you would have already qualified the
Correct.
firms that we're using. And okay, all right.
How does one, if one is a new company and did not exist when this qualification became our list, how does one get on that list?
I believe the contract is set up to be a certain time period, but we are looking at the possibility of requiring every firm to update their qualifications on an annual basis.
Good.
So because this is a qualifications list, if we have a firm that's interested, or we have a couple of firms that's interested, we could put it back up to renew those qualifications and add firms on. The other thing it allows us to do is, as qualifications or people shift and they're no longer able to do those, we can actually remove them from the list. So it gives us a whole lot more flexibility in working with the firms, what their capabilities are, as well as what their workload is.
Okay, Billy, do you have any other further questions or comments?
I do not.
Does any of council have further questions? Then, Billy, would you like to make a motion to accept item B?
Yes, Mayor, I make a motion that we accept item B.
Is there a second? And a second by Tommy. Any public comment at this point? With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Item B passes 7-0. We will now move into item F, which is consider accepting an annexation petition for 8.401 acres of land out of C. Berberick Survey number 177, abstract number 52, City of San Angelo, Tom Green County, Texas, being part of a 25.361 acre tract described and recorded in instrument number 201616044, official public records of Tom Green County, Texas, being a tract of land south of State Highway Loop 306, adjacent to the city limits east of Carson Creek Drive and west of Foster Road, and setting a public hearing on the annexation for the December 17, 2019 City Council meeting. Billy, would you like to ask some questions, please?
Yes. My first question I was going to ask, because I was not able to pull up one of the exhibits on there, but that has since been made available. But in the event someone would like to know exactly where is this located is my first question, John.
It's located just south of Loop 306, basically between Bentwood and Foster Road. So it's in that vacant land in that area just off of 306. In fact, the development that this is related to will access directly off of 306. There's a strip of property that is already within the city limits. It's about 530 feet deep from Loop 306. This is just bringing in the remainder of that property that's not already in the city limits. They're asking to have that annexed as well.
Okay, but they're not asking to have the entire tract, which is 25.361 acres, just the 8+ acres. Why is that?
Correct. Well, that's the part of the property that they have recently submitted a subdivision plat for a subdivision of residential homes. And so for now, they only want to annex the part that's being developed right now. Very likely, more of that will be annexed in the future, but they're only asking to annex that piece that they're developing in the near future.
Okay, so John, my next question is, I understand this is a petition that has been filed by the applicant for this to be annexed. What are the steps between this petition, if we vote to approve it today, and the December the 17th meeting? What happens during that time frame?
Well, in fact, city staff has already been working on developing a service plan. Part of what state law requires is any property that's annexed, the city has to adopt a service plan to show how we can serve the newly annexed area with roads, water, sewer, police, fire, parks, all of those kinds of things that the city does. So we're working with all of the other departments in the city to develop that service plan. So you will see that when this comes back at the December 17th meeting, as well as there'll be a public hearing at that point if anyone in the public wants to speak to that annexation.
Okay. So then I think my next question, my final question maybe, John, is you talked about roads and sewers and, water lines, et cetera, et cetera. If we're looking at annexing that in, does it immediately go on the tax rolls, or does it not go on the tax rolls until development starts? And then what if, by it going on the tax roll, that revenue there is not as great as the outlay that we're going to have to expend doing all that other stuff?
Let me answer the second question first. One of the things that we'll look at with that service plan is kind of general, we don't have exact numbers obviously, but kind of a general sense of this particular development that's being proposed. What are the long-term impacts to the city in terms of cost of maintenance and providing all city services, and compare that with the estimated tax revenue. And so you'll get to make a decision. If it looks like the development of this property won't bring in as much property taxes as it will cost in services, then you all make a decision whether or not it's worth having inside city limits. As far as the first question, any property that's annexed within the calendar year goes onto the tax rolls the beginning of the following year, so January 1st. Based on the calendar that we've set up for this one, it won't actually be annexed in this year. It'll be annexed in early 2020. That means it won't go on the tax rolls until January 2021. So assuming we annex this in, say, January, February, March, sometime in that time frame, it'll be in the city limits for probably 7, 8, 9 months before it goes on the tax rolls for the city taxes purposes. But it does not wait until the property develops. If the property never develops, it will be on the city tax rolls that next January 1st regardless.
Okay. All right.
I have two questions. One is on the issue of the 8.4 acres versus a 25.36. Why would we not at this point expect that the whole thing be annexed instead of just pieces out of it? It doesn't make sense to me to do 25% of it.
Well, the short answer is that's what they've requested as the property owner, and particularly with recent changes to state law regarding annexation. If a property owner is asking for a piece of property to be annexed, the annexation process is very simple. If the city chooses to annex property against the owner's request, or if an owner does not want to be annexed, then it's a very difficult process. And in fact, just recent changes to the state law makes it almost impossible to annex properties without the request of the property owner. But that's a question for you all. If you could reject the annexation if your thinking is we should either get the whole property or none. But I will say this is not atypical. It's often the case where property owners will request annexation of the piece they're developing, waiting to annex any other parts until they get ready to develop those other parts.
And then the next one is the next question or statement I have is, of course, part of the responsibility for water sewer lies on the developer. So what our responsibilities are simply having the water sewer brought to the property line. Anything on the property then becomes the property owner's responsibility, roads, streets, water, sewer, etc.
Well, in fact, we don't even extend those lines. The property owner, if lines don't get to their property, they're responsible for extending to that property and through their property.
That better explains to Billy some of the costs that she was asking
Right.
about, because you're thinking it's our responsibility to get it to the property, but it's not. So the cost relative to the city diminishes because it's really lies on the property owner.
Well, I will add, though, that the cost that we'll look at in terms of the service plan are not those costs, because we understand the developer puts in the roads, water, and
Yeah.
sewer lines. But what we will look at is a longer term. We are the ones who take over maintenance long term, and so that's a liability on the city anytime we approve a new development with a new road and new water and sewer lines. That adds to our liability for future maintenance costs.
This property is bordered on many sides by existing city property. Property that's in the city limits, right?
That's right.
So, it's kind of a hole in the big picture.
Right, and Mayor, what we have to do for annexation law is simply have the capacity to handle. So we have to have the capacity to handle the water or sewer once it's extended, the capacity to provide police and fire protection.
And with a small annexation like this, I don't think anyone expects that it's just a step we have to go through and create that service plan to basically show that we've looked at it and we can serve it.
I think it would be a problem if we couldn't handle 8 acres. Just commenting.
That was the issue.
I don't have any other questions.
Area,
I had trouble handling less.
All right, with that, Billy, does anyone else on council have comments, questions that they'd like to offer on item F? If not, Billy, would you like to make a motion to approve?
John, thank you for that information. And Mayor, I make a motion to approve item F.
Okay, seconded by Lane. Any public comment? With no public comment, then we will take a vote. All in favor of approving item F, say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, motion passes 7-0. We'll move on to item H. Second reading on an ordinance amending the Land Development and Subdivision Ordinance Chapters 1, 9, and 10 to address adequate public facilities, to rename Chapter 9, to amend design requirements to refer to city engineer specifications, and to create an administrative exemption for reduced street standards in infill areas. John, a couple things. Number one, I like the idea that we're moving to certain issues and administrative approval. The question mark is, number one, for anyone that you're working with, what is their ability to appeal a decision that you make, since it's an administrative decision?
The ordinance actually addresses that. Basically, it's the normal variance process. So it says if the administrative approval isn't granted, then their variance, which this is just a form of a variance request, will go on to the Planning Commission like a normal plat variance would in any other case.
Would you just repeat for the public the things within this that this allows you to administratively approve? For example, street width, to relocation of lots turning left to right or north to south.
Yeah, basically this addresses the street issue, and so it would allow, upon agreement of both the planning director and the city engineer, it would allow an administrative approval of a variance to allow a street to be a lesser width than what is currently required for a new street. It would also allow modifications to curb and gutter, or even elimination of curb and gutter on a street. So for example, if you're developing in an existing area where the existing street is, say, 32 feet wide, our standard for a new street is 40 feet. Well, under the current ordinance, if you're building in that area or re-subdividing, you are responsible for expanding that street to the full 40-foot width. We've seen a number of variances where developers are requesting to allow the street to remain at the current width, in this case, say 32 feet. But that still requires them to go to the Planning Commission for that variance. This allows that to be done by the administrative process.
And it also allows someone, if they want to change the way the plat's laid out, for example, if they're facing one way and they want to turn it the other way, this allows for administrative approval of that?
Well, it doesn't allow administrative approval of that replat itself, but in that's one of the circumstances where it does allow the modification to the road standards. That's right.
Okay. Do I have questions from council on this item? With none, I'll make a motion to approve item H. Is there a second?
Second.
A second by Lucy. Any public comment? With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, motion passes 7-0. We'll now move into the regular agenda, and we'll start by
You need to
doing...
go back to D.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. All right. So in the regular agenda, we're going to start with item D from the consent agenda. And item D is, one, allocating matching funds in the amount of $40,000 for the application of a grant with the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department for trail and trailhead improvements at the recreation lands at Twin Buttes Reservoir. And two, allocating matching funds in the amount of $15,000 for the city's portion of the cost in cooperation with the Bureau of Reclamation for a new dock at the main ramp on the north side of Twin Buttes Reservoir, and authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute all related documents. Carl?
Yes, we have updated information on the first part of this item, and just to give a little bit of background, all the lands in the water at Twin Buttes Reservoir are owned by the Bureau of Reclamation. The city is in agreement to manage those properties. About 3 years ago, City Council authorized a three-way agreement with the Bureau of Reclamation and Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, and I believe it's worked out very well. It's allowed us to do two important things, move forward with two important things. One is TPWD, Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, has overlay of the Texas Public Hunting Lands Program, which has allowed them to be more interactive with the management of those lands for recreational use and for hunting. The second part is that the Bureau of Reclamation has moved forward with the Transportation Management Plan, which basically it's almost complete. It's waiting for the last few steps of authorization. Allows for off-road vehicle use at the reservoir, including vehicles, all-terrain vehicles, and motorcycles through a series of different trails and roadways. In a meeting late last week, it was clarified that the grant that we could actually apply from Texas Parks and Wildlife Department is higher than what I had anticipated. We're used to the regular trail grant that has a ceiling of $200,000. This one actually goes up to $400,000. And so instead of asking for a match of $40,000, we're asking for a match of $60,000 out of the same funding source, which is an 80-20% match. They provide 80% of the funds. We provide 20% of the funds. What this will allow us to do is to go out there, once this transportation management plan is approved, and implementation is anticipated for May of 2021, is to go out there and do some parking improvements, add some trailheads, some signage, and signage posts along all the trails so folks know what trail they're on, what direction to go, and other information like that.
Do I have questions from council? Lucy?
Can you repeat, what was the city match? What would the city be matching?
It's 20%, so it'd be $60,000. And we're looking for a $300,000 grant project.
Oh, 300, okay.
Not the 400.
Correct. And the second part of this item doesn't change. There's higher water levels out there, so use of the main boat ramp, the marina boat ramp off of Highway 67 has become more popular. There's no dock out there now. The Bureau is going to help us with 75% match to our 25% match to add a new dock out there with your approval.
I'm a little confused. So we said that the grant went from $200,000 to $400,000.
The ceiling's $400,000. We're only shooting for $300,000.
Why?
We don't anticipate that it's going to cost $400,000, but it's definitely going to be more than $200,000.
And you have no other projects that you need to work on out there?
At this point, really, it's just the trails and the trailheads.
And the grant is specific for a certain criteria of projects that it'll qualify for.
Right.
Okay.
That's trail related.
All right. So with that, Do I have a motion for approval?
Move
Tommy's
approval.
making a motion for approval and a second by Tom. And any public comment? With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. With none opposed, motion passes 7-0.
Thanks, Carl.
We will move into what would be item A, or the regular agenda. Comments regarding items on the regular agenda may be made by the public when each item is discussed as outlined above. Applicants, proponents, and appellants are exempted from the time limit above and instead must limit their remarks to less than 5 minutes. So item A, consider a resolution for the use of construction manager at-risk procurement for the expansion of the Hickory Water Supply. Presentation by Scott Hibbs, Emprotech Hibbs and Todd Incorporated, and Waters Utility Director Allison Struve.
Morning, Mayor, Council,
Morning.
Mr. Valenzuela. A few meetings ago, we were here wrapping up the Texas Water Development Board funding, and we're still very excited about that extremely low interest rate. And this item that we're bringing forward today is how we'd like to procure that construction of the Hickory project and the expansion of the well field and treatment system from 8 million gallons a day to 12. I don't want to take away from Scott's presentation, so I will turn it over to him and then come back to you with the recommendation.
Thank you, Allison. Mayor, Council, Daniel, good morning. Scott Hibbs with EHT. We're the lead design engineer for the project. As Allison mentioned, we're going to talk to you today about ultimately a recommendation to use a construction manager at risk procurement method for the contracts for actually constructing the improvements to expand the Hickory. So I want to spend a little bit of time with the council to just review what that is and how that differs from what you're used to, which is the traditional design. You go out for bid and then you have a contractor to perform the work. So we'll look at a little bit of history on design, bid, build, the traditional method, and then I'll help answer questions and give you some details on the construction manager at risk philosophy, the best applications for it, why owners are using that for certain projects, and how it is then implemented. So first, design, bid, build. That's very familiar to the city. It is the normal contracting method. This graphic shows that you, under this method, have a contract with the engineer. After the project is designed and bid, the city enters into a contract with the general construction contractor that then goes out and procures the trades and the equipment suppliers. It's just the normal way that the city has historically delivered projects. It's a typical method and has been proven in the past and is widely used and will continue to be the method preferred to be used on most projects. Best applications, obviously, people that are familiar with design, bid, build, and pleased with the results continue to use it. It provides the owner, it provides your staff a high degree of input during the design phase so that the city's needs are accounted for. It's a great method when schedule is not really a priority. If you remember when you go out for bids, typically you allow the contractors to enter as a part of the bid how long they will take to do the work. It's not a real quick way to deliver a project. We use it when projects have a very well-defined scope. If you're doing a water line, for example, from Main Street to 4th Street, you know exactly what the scope of the project is. It's very laid out, so every contractor is looking at the same documents and can provide their price on a like design basis. And we also use it when enabling laws don't allow alternatives to project delivery. One of the things that we're going to talk about with CMAR is that there are now enabling legislative actions in Texas that allow cities to make that choice. And the reason that we're here in front of you today is part of that requirement is the council has to take action on that method of contracting. So let's look at a few disadvantages for design, bid, build. You're always ending up with the low bid contractor. And as most of you know, that can be good most of the time. It can be bad some of the time. And when it's bad, it's a real challenge. In a project like this, and Allison's going to mention this when she comes up to talk about the recommendation, a project like the Hickory, where we have work going on at the well field, we have work going on at pump stations, we have work going on at the groundwater treatment plant, you're managing multiple contracts, and that becomes a challenge. The other thing that I have highlighted in red here, and one of the advantages that we'll talk about with the CMAR method is under design bid build, the owner retains the risk of the project. In other words, if there's a change to the project, and the council is very aware when changes happen, somebody has to stand up like me and say, here's why the change, we're requesting a change order to the contract, and the contractor bears no responsibility for that. It's all put back on the city. So what does construction manager at risk do? It's the same basic diagram. You're still going to have a contract with us as a design professional. You'll still have a contract but with a construction contractor, but instead of multiple contractors, it is a single contractor. And what you're doing with construction manager at risk is you're pushing that risk down to your design team and to the contracting team, and minimizing then the risk of the project costs from the city's perspective. They still have to go out and procure their subcontractors and their equipment vendors through the traditional methods. We met with purchasing to go over this concept with them so that they could understand that just because you have a general construction contractor as the CMAR, the responsibilities that they have to still bid the individual components of the project remain. So the best applications, you can read through these, the ones that I highlighted. The project is complex or the scope is uncertain. It's not an uncertain scope with the Hickory project. We know what we're trying to do, but it is a very complex project. You're dealing with wells that are 60 miles away from the city. You're dealing with advanced treatment components, so it's not just a normal project where you're laying that water line from Main Street to 4th Street. We also like it because it ensures maximum participation from local subcontractors. As I mentioned before, if you do a design bid build, you get a contractor that is now responsible for that project. With CMAR, you have an overall contractor, but they're still responsible to bid out each individual component of work that has to be done. So a lot of times they're able to actually take the construction packages and put them into small enough pieces that the local contractors have a better chance of securing some of that work than they do under a traditional design bid build contract. And the most important reason, and the reason that I'm here today, we believe, and I think staff is going to recommend to you, that for this project, use of the CMAR is really the best value to the city. It enables you to have a single point of contact for a very complex, large project, but it retains the control that the city has, or the procurement of bidding each individual component, and it also puts the risk for any cost overruns down to the contractor. So just really quickly, why are owners looking at this? It is becoming a method of choice, as I said, for contracts that are fairly complex. You see that this level of satisfaction, this was from a study that was done a couple of years ago. But overall, the owners are extremely pleased with a couple of things. One is communication. On a large, complex project, you're not, if you can picture individual contracts, there's always finger pointing. Well, that's not in my contract, that's in your contract. Well, I didn't bid that, you need to take care of it. With this concept, we have one entity that is over that whole coordination, and the communication is extremely improved. There's another really positive aspect that we like as a design professional. As good as we are, we design, we don't build. So it's oftentimes that the contractor, when they enter into a contract, will make suggestions. Well, you've designed this detail this way. If we actually build it this other way, we can save a little bit of money. And we'll entertain those, but those always end up as some type of change order. Sometimes it's a change order to deduct price. Sometimes it's a change order to increase price. With this method of delivery, we'll actually have the construction manager at risk on board before we're 100% complete with design. Part of their contract will be what we call pre-construction phase services. And you see a whole list of things here, but what that really means to you and what it really means to me is we bring the contractor in before the design is finished so that they can provide their value engineering, their years of experience in the contracting industry to say, let's look at this a little bit different. We can evaluate it from an engineering standpoint, and we end up with a better product at the end of the day by working collaboratively with the contractor to get them on board as part of the process. So as I mentioned, state legislative action is required. Teresa has looked at the code, and it's under 2269, so the CMAR method is an alternate procurement method that is acceptable in the state of Texas. The process that we would go by is we would actually go out for proposals, and we can use either a one or a two-step process. I won't get into too many of those details. We'll work that out with staff should council approve this. We'll hold a pre-proposal meeting. Any of the contractors that are interested will be here. We'll actually answer questions and have a pretty robust dialogue with them. We'll receive proposals, and then we'll evaluate the proposals based on both cost and non-cost. It gives the city some flexibility to make sure that we've got the right contractor for the right price to do this project. Ultimately, once a contractor is selected, the recommendation for award obviously comes back to the city. And in addition to the city, with Water Development Board funding, we need approval from the Water Development Board. So not only do we have city oversight with this process, but we have the Water Development Board that will provide their approval when we get to that point. Then we sign the contract and we establish what they call a guaranteed maximum price. This is where the risk that I was talking about gets pushed down to the contractor. So what we do under a construction manager at risk contract is we will bring to the council a series of contractor prepared guaranteed maximum prices. So together those GMPs, as we call them, form the contract amount. At that point, the contractor is 100% at risk for everything that they've committed to doing. If there's a doorknob that fails, it's their responsibility to fix it. If they did not see that there was a valve in the pipeline at 4th Street, it's their responsibility to put the valve in. It takes that risk off of the city and puts it back into the contractor. And I highlighted on here, how is it different from what we call a normal hard bid or that design bid build? We mentioned change orders. You will not have me standing up here discussing change orders. That risk is pushed down to the contractor. Under the GMP, changes in equipment or construction pricing doesn't change the amount that we're going to pay the contractor. They are the ones that are bearing that risk. And then most importantly, the way that we set up the contracts, we will allow or have provisions that any savings that the contractor realizes under the GMP, a portion of that needs to come back to the city. They are taking the risk, so if they can save some money, they'll certainly do some of that. But we always structure the contract so that a portion of that savings comes back to the city. We have been involved in a number of CMAR projects during this last drought cycle because of schedule. It was really critical to get some work done. So far, and I can't promise how this one will work out, but so far I've never failed to have a CMAR contract that did not offer a pretty significant return back to the city at the completion of the job, and that's one of the benefits that I see from them. So with that, I'll ask Allison to kind of finish up with how the project worked in the first phase of the Hickory, why staff is recommending this, and then I'd be happy to answer questions.
Can we ask you some questions before she comes up
Absolutely,
first?
You're the boss.
All right. How would you know if there are cost savings? If I'm the contractor doing the work, why do I have to share with you where if I bid it to be $1 million and it's $800,000, how do we know those numbers?
Mayor, that's a great question, and probably one I should have better addressed. With the construction manager at risk concept, it's actually open book. We have access to every financial document that they have. They can't, with a traditional contract, you don't get to see the contractor's books, if you will. They go do the job, and whatever money they make, you'll never know. With this particular method, we actually see every bid. We actually see every dollar that they spend for administrative costs, and we actually, I won't say audit, we have the right to audit, but we watch those and track those on a monthly basis so that we know exactly what they're doing.
And based off of this, isn't the first time we've been working on this Hickory Aquifer project. So what are the lessons that we have learned from the last go-around that we can make sure are taken care of in this go-around, like the rock, the hardness of the rock, the issues attached to that?
Yes, ma'am. So I wanted to speak about the lessons learned from the previous Hickory project. I did come in about 3/4 of the way through that process, but I can tell you, one, managing the multiple contracts, whether it was the wellfield drilling, the wellfield pipeline expansion, the booster pump station, the groundwater treatment plant, we had probably at least 7 to 8 contracts on that $120 million project. And one thing that happened with each of those projects is obviously the groundwater treatment plant is communicating out with the well field, but the communication system at the well field was built by contractor A. The communications and the tower infrastructure built at the booster pump station was another contractor, and then making its way all the way back to the groundwater treatment facility, that communication system and IT infrastructure, those type of things were all done by another contractor. But it still has to all communicate together. It has, and so we had some issues wrapping up that project, and things that we had to work some serious bugs out is being able to communicate from the treatment facility all the way back out to the wells producing that water. And so under one umbrella, having that communication all done and overseen by a contractor is one of the values that I see in this contract. The other thing that we had issues with were obviously the drilling contractor and how that delayed that next contract that had already gone through the design bid build. We'd already bid it out, awarded that contract, but because of the delays that the drilling contractor had caused LDs on a contract that we hadn't even started. And so having, once again, under one contract that's managing all those moving pieces is one of the, I guess, best values that I see going forward with the CMAR project.
I've got a couple more questions, but I want Billy to have it. Did you have a question, Billy?
Well, I'm not sure. I guess either one of you could answer this, but mine was early on when you pointed out the disadvantages of the design build. I don't recall you pointing out any shortfalls or disadvantages for CMAR, if there be any. Are there any that you've come across in your working with CMAR?
That's a great question. Yes, I would say that the biggest disadvantage is to misapply when to use a CMAR. It is a tremendous method, as I shared, for complex projects with multiple moving pieces. It is not the right application for most projects that you do. This will be a large contractor, but this is a large project. This is in the neighborhood of $50 million. So you can misuse this approach with projects that don't justify the use of a CMAR. But from outside of that, there really are very few disadvantages. The open book component of it, the pushing of the risk down to the contractor to let them manage it, and you wouldn't have had with the trouble at the well field. That's all going to be the responsibility of that CMAR, and you won't be bothered with why is that impacting this other work and how is this communicated. So the biggest disadvantage I see is if you misapply it on a project, but if it's the right project, there really are no disadvantages to it.
So another question is, you mentioned that their books are open, whoever the manager at risk is, and there's an opportunity to audit or take a look at, who would do that? Would you do that, Scott, or would we do that locally?
That's another great question. We do that on a routine basis. We're kind of your eyes and ears as far as making sure that all of that is happening. Where we would bring in outside folks is if we had reason to believe that the CMAR was not performing and was not doing the things in the open manner that we require. I have not had to do that yet. We have one of our staff members is an accountant, our chief financial officer, and he spends a lot of time on these projects making sure that the invoicing and the billing and everything has the proper documentation. And I would also say that, again, with this project with the Water Development Board, you've got another layer of checks and balances, if you will. As tough as we are, the Water Development Board can even be more difficult. So they're going to have another opportunity to have eyes on every dollar that is spent. And as a matter of fact, as the CMAR bids out the different packages that they'll have to bid out, the Water Development Board will have to approve each of those packages, just as I will bring those back to the council for approval.
So with the guaranteed maximum that you spoke about earlier, somebody is overseeing that so that, I know this sounds like such a cynical question, but so that, it's not, the bid is not overstated. Somebody is looking at that to say, here you're charging $100,000 for this, and typically this is $50,000, so why the $100,000? Those sorts of questions are being asked.
Wouldn't that be done during the process when you send out the request for proposals? Because you would hope, and this would be a question to add to that, is based off of this process and this CMAR thing, will we have multiple people who apply, or is this something that limits the number of people who might look at this as a project going, I don't really want to work under those rules and regulations. It puts too much on my back. I don't want to carry that weight. So in that sense, would you project that we'll have 2 or 3 people who actually want to try this project on?
So multiple questions there. Let me try to see if I can catch them all. The answer is yes, you'll have a significant number of firms. I would anticipate 3 to 5 that will be interested in this. This is a normal method of contracting now in the state because of larger, more complex projects. It actually then, Mayor, helps, as I mentioned, for your local subcontractors where you probably don't have anybody in San Angelo that is capable of managing a $50 million project. You do have lots of folks that are capable of supplying different pieces of equipment and smaller construction components that will happen on the job. So back to the question of how do you watch the money? When we bring you a guaranteed maximum price, we will have, and the Water Development Board will have both looked at those numbers to validate that they're reasonable. So let's just say, for example, the wells. So there's the general contract, or the CMAR will give us a guaranteed maximum price for the wells, and I'm just going to use a number of $5 million. I don't know what that number is. So we give the CMAR a guaranteed maximum price of $5 million. They still then have to go out and secure the drillers to do that work. So if they have to bid, and that is a bid process just like you're used to seeing. It's just conducted by the CMAR. So the CMAR is going to go out and bid the wells. And let's say that they're successful in finding a well driller that will do the work for $4 million. Well, there's $1 million worth of savings off of that guaranteed maximum price. A significant portion of that will come back to the city. Conversely, if they've given us a price of $5 million, they go out and solicit bids, and that work comes in at $5.5 million, they're at risk. It's their $500,000 that they're going to spend because you've guaranteed that you're going to give them $5 million. So anything above that, they take the responsibility for. Anything below that, you get a portion of that savings back. So it's a very transparent, it's actually more transparent than a typical design bid build. When you get a typical bid, you don't see all of the subcontract prices, you don't see all the equipment prices, you don't see any of that. In this method, we will see every single piece of equipment, we will see every small contract, everything will be open and available to us to review. So it's a very transparent process.
You establish this CMR would establish the maximum price tag?
Yes, the CMAR will do that. And we'll bring that to council and to the Water Development Board for approval.
And so when we get 5 people who apply and want to do this project and all of them have bids over and above what has been established as the maximum number, then what happens?
That's another good question. When we actually go out for proposals, we will not, at that point, they will not give us the guaranteed maximum price. What we're asking for on proposals, first of all, are qualifications. We want to make sure that we have a contractor that is capable of doing and overseeing this work. And the way this is, the pricing comes in, they will price the pre-construction phase services. There will be a dollar value for that. And then we generally set up the contracts so that they get they make a percentage of, for example, equipment procurement. As they procure equipment, they may make 3% on whatever that equipment cost is. For other subcontracts, that's typically 5 or 6%. So there's a percentage that they give to us on what they're going to charge to manage the project, if you will. The guaranteed maximum price comes later, after they've been selected, after they're under contract, after they review all the drawings. That's when they put their pricing together.
Okay.
Mayor,
yes, Tommy?
I have a question, Scott. Are there generally accepted guidelines for a firm to be a CMAR that are out there that
I wish there were. That is a great question. There are not. So that becomes incumbent upon us on how we write that request for qualifications. And we've done enough CMAR work that we know what questions to ask and how to structure that to find a firm that is capable of doing it. Typically, the way we would approach this, we would receive written qualifications, and then I'm a very strong believer in having the selection committee that the city will put together, actually listen to interviews with the firms so that we make sure that we have the right firm selected for the project.
This seems like a very complex, detailed time project. So with this, what is the time frame we're looking at from here to beginning of work?
Another great question. We're knee-deep in design right now. We just met with staff a week or two ago on a pretty extensive review. We called it the 60% review from where we are on design. I believe you guys are closing with the Water Development Board next month. I would anticipate that we would be, you've got to kind of eliminate from now through the end of the year, things kind of grind to a halt. So we would be looking to go out for CMAR with the proposal process starting in January. So I would anticipate that we would have somebody on board by, let's say, March, and probably the first thing that they will go to work on will be the wells, since that's going to be a long construction item. So I think you're going to see contractor selection the first quarter of next year. I think you're going to actually start seeing some dirt turned shortly after that. I think last time I looked at the schedule, the 100% completion on everything be at the end of 2021.
And that means completion of the wells, everything, like done.
Yes, ma'am.
End of 2021.
Yes.
Done.
And while we're talking schedule, while we've been blessed with rains and we still have about 68 months of water supply, just including the minimum from the Hickory, we do have a ranch for sale. And so moving this project forward in a timely fashion so that we're not out at the ranch for a very long time, especially during showings and those type of things, I think is also a value.
All right, do I have further questions at this point? If not, Allison, did you want to come forward and make a proposal?
Basically, I wanted to say that, yes, with the lessons learned from the previous project and the ability to do this, we recommend as staff to move forward with a CMAR procurement with the Hickory expansion.
So do I need a motion on this? So do I have a motion? Lane wants to make a motion.
I'm sorry, you need the motion to state essentially what's on the screen. We need to include the best value language in that because that's actually what you're determining today.
So Lane, would you, in your motion, please read the screen as your motion?
Make a motion that the use of the CMAR project.
Make a motion to use of the CMAR project for the Hickory water supply expansion will provide the best value and most efficient method of procurement of the city for the city of San Angelo.
All right, and do I have a second?
Second.
And a second by Billy. We will open up for public comment at this point.
Steve Hampton, District 6. I appreciate the questions that you two ladies have been asking. I think they're excellent questions. Very good, very good. One that keeps coming to my mind, though, is we talk about cost overruns in the DBB part, but we never have talked about what additional funding might be or cost overruns might be involved with the CMART. So
I think he addressed that early on, Steve, and that was that if there are cost overruns, the contractor has got to eat it. And it's
but how much do they price it above what it would be, what it might cost in order that you get your return?
I think we asked that question as well, and I believe the answer was, Scott, you want to come forward and explain that again? But the issue is that when we accept the bid, that bid is the bid. So anything under, they have to be, in order to be selected, they'd have to meet that maximum price as stated or less than in order to get awarded the project. And then anything over and above, they have to eat. If it's under, there's a negotiation
yes,
in terms of.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Mayor, that's a good way to explain it. I appreciate the question that's being asked. The concern is how do you manage the CMAR so that they're not giving you a $2 million price for what they know will be $1 million worth of work. And that's where the oversight from both us as your engineer and in this particular case, the Water Development Board comes in. We're charged with managing and working with the CMAR to make sure that they're pricing it correctly and accepting the risk. Otherwise, if you allowed this to happen in that manner, it's no longer a construction manager at risk type concept. So between our work and the oversight that is provided with your staff and the Water Development Board, that's how we ensure that we've got a contractor that is playing fair. And again, with the at the end of the day, with the open book concept, that we have the right and we do look at every cost and every expenditure that they have that provides further comfort, if you will, for the process.
Thank you very much. Steve, did you have another question?
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, I might not be able to phrase it right, but what I'm talking about, how much additional cost on the CMART type of control over the average cost of a DBB type of control?
I think Scott also talked about that, but there is potentially savings with the CMAR over the design bid build project.
Are there potential additional costs with the CMAR process? I think that's really the question.
Not if there's a GMAX.
I know, but let him answer. He asked, we're going to answer it.
No, that's why we do the guaranteed maximum price. What I can tell you is that the other advantage that I have seen, and probably the largest job that we did this method on, was the Abilene wastewater plant expansion that we did in response to the drought so that they could have indirect reuse. It was roughly an $80–85 million project. In working with the CMAR, we could document that they saved $5 million on equipment costs because of their ability when they're bidding that to bid and to negotiate those prices for the best value for the city. That's where the real cost savings comes in, is you've now equipped somebody and given them the ability. They have to bid it, but they can work with the bidding contractors and they can find the right equipment for the right price for the project, and that's where the best value comes in.
It's to their benefit to do it for better than.
Absolutely, because any
They get a
savings,
percentage.
they get a portion of that, and you guys get a portion of it, yes.
Okay. Any other public comment? With no more public comment, we will take a vote. As motion made by Lane and seconded by Billy, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, motion passes 7-0. Item B, first reading and public hearing of an ordinance approving the abandonment and vacation of approximately 2.37 acres of land that includes portions of Houston Street, Dallas Street, and alleys between Block 77, 78, and 86 of the Hatcher Addition, generally located between West Houston Hart Expressway, Frontage Road, Millspaw Street, Freeland Avenue, and Howell Street. John?
Thank you. John James, Director of Planning and Development Services. You can see here on the map, these in blue are all of the areas that are proposed for abandonment. You can see portions of Dallas Street, Houston, and then these alleys within those blocks. As you'll see, most of that area is owned by the applicant. There's a piece over here owned by another church, and I think some pieces up here that are owned by another property owner as well. But the vast majority is owned by TLC, and their idea is to basically combine all of that into larger lots for possible future development. You can see the future land use and zoning of the area. It's a combination of neighborhood and commercial uses, or commercial zoning, I should say. As you see, most of that land adjacent to these roadways is currently vacant, and most of those rights of way are also have never been built as alleys or streets on the ground. This is just the concept plan showing all of those same rights of way that would be abandoned. A few pictures. Again, you can see this is Dallas Street, so there is actually there's a path there. Maybe some caliche has been put down in the past, but in all of these cases, no street, full street has ever been built. So I won't read through all of these there in your background information.
No, go ahead and read them.
Okay, the things that we look at for an abandonment, one is traffic patterns. Given the grid of streets in this area and the fact that these streets have not been built, we believe that the existing street infrastructure is sufficient for the area, even if these streets are abandoned. Likewise, there are some utilities in some of those rights of way that will either be an easement maintained for those utilities, or if the owner of the property wishes to relocate those, they have the ability to do that as well. So there will be no impact on utilities. We did send our notifications to the surrounding property owners. We have not received any in opposition. And again, as I mentioned, they are the owners of most of the properties adjacent to these, and so the applicant would plan to replat these properties to incorporate the alleys and rights of way into their larger properties in order to consolidate, as I said, for future development. I mentioned we did send out our notifications. We did receive one in favor, but none in opposition. Staff does recommend approval. As just a reminder, this does go through a review committee that includes folks from not only planning, but also utilities and police and fire and other departments as well, to look at whether or not this is a good idea to abandon these streets. We are recommending 5 conditions of approval. This did go to the Planning Commission in October, and unanimously they recommended approval with those same 5 conditions. The normal condition of pay, the ordinance has an assessment formula that the applicant pays to acquire those abandoned streets and alleys, and that's established by ordinance. They would have to record a quitclaim deed, or we would record a quitclaim deed to allow for the transfer of the property, and they would pay the fees for that. They would have to replat the abandoned rights-of-way into the surrounding property, as I mentioned, dedicating easements if necessary as part of the replat, and then install new driveway approaches if necessary. So right now, there may be some areas where a driveway accesses onto one of those unimproved streets. They would have to either relocate driveways or extend the existing driveway out to what would become the new streets. In other words, no longer allowing access directly onto what was a right-of-way. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Do I have, Lane, you want to make any
Can you
comments?
go back to that map that shows the grid right there, where the 2 number 5s, that is one owner of a property, is that correct?
Yes, that is this other church. If you saw on the right there is a different church unrelated to the applicant, and they do own all of that property.
And it extends from Mill Spa to Alexander. Okay.
So they own all the lots.
The two
number
two
fives.
lots that say number 5 is the other church. Yeah, and all of these ones you can see are owned by the applicant, and then a few over here as well.
My concern right there is if we abandon Dallas Street, that's between Alexander and Mill Spa, we're cutting off the back access of those 2 lots, devaluing the property. If they ever wanted to sell off that half that is not the church itself, their property would be burdened by that. So, with that, I will accept this proposal, except for the portion of Dallas Street between Alexander and Mill Spa, and that would be my motion.
Let me ask, are there any other questions from anyone on council before we accept the motion?
John? Sorry about that. It's my understanding the property owner is actually in California that owns the property of the church, and so the notification went to that property owner instead of the local one. Would that be true?
The leasing?
I don't know if that's the case, but yes, the notices go to the listed property owner per the county property records.
And I'm kind of in agreement with Lane. I see that part as, as part of the property values. And if there's abandonment on that, doesn't that other church also have to agree the abandonment on taking some of that also?
Yeah, well, they would have the option to take in their half of Dallas. So that one half would go to them, the other half would go to the other side. If they choose not to do that, then the applicant in this case would then have the option to take both halves.
So what happens if the other church doesn't want it to happen?
Well,
from their right of way on, from Alexander,
they would contact you all, and you would probably make a decision based on that information.
And they have, but I'm just bringing that up so everybody here understands which way we're fixing to go.
Do I have other questions from council on this item? Then Lane, you want to state your motion?
I'll restate it. My motion is to accept the proposal except for the portion of Dallas Street in between Alexander and Mill Spa, and the rest will be okay.
And do I have a second by Tom? Do I have public comment?
Morning.
Good morning.
I'm Don Jackson, pastor of the other church, Parkside Community. Not Parkview. We have been in contact with TLC quite a bit, but we are in opposition to that closing. So I appreciate, Lane, you making that exemption because it would First of all, it'd give us no access to the back part of our property. Secondly, it would devalue our property. We have had 3 builders approach us about building houses on those lots down at that end. We haven't decided to do that because that is for our future expansion. We have held that. We have not expanded on that. We actually pay tax on that part of it because we are not using it, and we want to do everything above board as possible. So we pay taxes on that, but we are in opposition to closing that, and we appreciate your consideration of that.
Further public comment?
Good morning, Russell Gully with SKG Engineering, here representing Angelo Christian Ministries. We appreciate your time of hearing this. The Angelo Christian Ministries is in the process of development and growth and working to kind of revitalize and improve that area. And these streets, the Hatcher addition has been platted over 100 years, and still to date, the street has not been paved. Nobody's made the effort, seen the financial need to pave and improve that portion of that Dallas Street. You're looking at probably over $250 a foot just to put a street on the ground. So it's not going to be for the faint of heart or light of wallet to go and put this infrastructure on the ground. So we understand there is the concern of losing development potential. And this Mountain View tract is currently platted as one lot, not numerous lots. There's not the ability to go put a large residential development in that area because it's platted as a single lot. So
You could replat it.
You could
Yeah, it doesn't
absolutely
eliminate
replat it, and at that point in time, they would have to go in and improve Dallas Street, extend utilities wherever they're needed. So Angelo Christian Ministries, just, you see this, you've seen a street that's been platted but not built on for over 100 years. So, hey, let's do something about that. You see something sitting for over 100 years that's never been done and used, let's put it to use. And so that's our mentality is let's take this land and use it and put it on the tax roll. Currently, it's not on the tax roll. And so the city will create monetary gain by the closing of this because of the assessment that's received
Wait a minute,
from
if
this.
it's a nonprofit, a church is a nonprofit and they own it, there's no property tax to the city on a property owned by a nonprofit.
Only if it's being used as religious purposes. So as they had indicated, that this other part they're not currently using for religious purposes, so they're actually having to pay tax on that portion of it. And so that would go kind of to the right of way as well. So really we just want your consideration, Lane. We thank you for your support for the other part of it. So at a minimum, we like to move forward with that, but we would appreciate the consideration to really close the entirety of Dallas. If the church wants to buy their half of it, they're absolutely welcome to do that. If not, then Angelo Christian Ministries is willing to buy their portion and carry the burden of those costs for doing that. So we would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? All right, thank you, Russell. Any further public comment?
Don Crabtree, representing Angelo Christian Ministries and the Life Church. And just want to state right up front, again, our appreciation for the help that you've given us in our recent developments as we have recently rezoned the blocks that we have there between Howe and Alexander and between Alexander and Millspaw, and we're grateful for that support as well as the variances that were given by you for our ability to construct a digital billboard, and I'm sure most of you have passed by and seen that and has been a real asset and a blessing to the church. I'd just like to state that, again, as Mr. Russell Gulley has pointed out, the original plat, and I do have that if anybody's interested to see it, the original plat of Hatcher, and then again, when Mountain View Park addition was made, there were never any concessions there for lots on that portion that is denominated here as 5. They are not denominated on the original Hatcher plot. It was actually part of a master plan for what appears to be a grand plaza. And the church Parkside Church, for some reason I keep wanting to call it Parkview. Parkside Church is actually constructed on a portion of what would have been that grand plaza. And then again, when the area was platted into Mountain View Park, there were never any lots made there I should say lots plural. It is acreage. And so, again, we're just asking that consideration be given for our application. We have a lot of plans. I understand the democratic process. I understand Dr. Jackson told me that they were going to be making several phone calls to you. I do not represent TLCA. It is another entity that we have agreements with on some of these properties. But, we could pull out the stops, and we have about 120 some employees total. We have over 800 families that are represented by the school. I mean, if it were just a question of a campaign for the democratic process, we could certainly participate in that as well. We're just asking that based on the merits of the application and for the benefit of actually both property owners, that you would consider our application as is. Thank you.
Further public comment?
We did send in.
You need to
an
restate your
opposition.
name.
I'm
and
Don Jackson, pastor of Parkside Community Church. We did send in an opposition. I'm not sure what happened to it, but I did personally send that.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further public comment? All right, Lane, you have a motion on the floor to approve with the exception of Dallas Street between Mills Spa and Alexander, is that correct? Okay. With that, we will take a vote. All in favor of Lane's motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Item C, first public hearing and introduction of an ordinance amending the budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2019 and ending September 30th, 2020 for capital items, donation grants, and projects. Tina?
Good morning, Mayor, City Council, Mr. Valenzuela, Tina Diersky, Director of Finance, with the budget amendment for your review and approval today. The first one we have up is for police canine revenue. That is from a donation from a private citizen, which you approved, I think, in the last City Council meeting for $25,000 to help with canine bulletproof vests and other safety equipment. The next one is a police grant. It's a JAG grant. That revenue is coming, of course, from the grant in the amount of almost $25,000, and the expenditures will be split between the police department and Tom Green County. Next up is the bond proceeds, of course, in relation to the project that Allison just explained to you all. Again, that debt issuance, or it's really not a debt issuance, it's a loan from the Texas Water Development Board, came in with an interest rate of under 0.5%. I think it was 0.472%. We'll receive those proceeds on December 5th, so we're budgeting for the revenue and as well the corresponding expenditures. Stormwater Fund is requesting to use a portion of their fund balance. It's a planned use of fund balance for equipment, machinery, and vehicle needs that they have for stormwater.
And why was that not in the original budget conversations?
When we include these amounts for capital items that come from fund balance in the original budget, it then becomes a part of the original budget in each subsequent year. So on the finance staffs, from our perspective, it's cleaner to budget for that after the beginning of the year. That way it's not included in every original budget going forward.
All right, so, but we have many times machinery and equipment, vehicles that is brought forward for our approval, either in the consent, most often in the consent agenda, which is budgeted. Why would that be different on this?
This is sitting in their fund balance, and so for them to use it out of fund balance, it requires city council further approval.
And what is this machinery and vehicles?
Let me ask Shane or Patrick to come up and address that for you.
Good morning, Mayor.
Morning.
This, on the machinery on this one is for a street sweeper. We've had all of our street sweepers going into the program for 8, 9, and 10 years, and so last year we started the replacement program, and so this is just a continuation of the replacement program for our street sweepers. And that's what the fund balance was originally. We've been stashing money back year after year after year for equipment replacement, and so last year we actually didn't make it a part of the budget going up front, but finance thinks it's much cleaner to do it this way. So we're kind of doing a budget amendment after
So
the
we
new
have
year.
2 street sweepers now, is that correct?
We actually have five street sweepers right now, and so we're going through the replacement process. So we will sell one in the auction this coming year. After we get the new one in, we will put one in the auction and dispose of it.
All right, so what's the difference between the machinery and the vehicles?
In the vehicles is just for a pickup replacement, to replace one pickup within that division
The
as well.
street sweeper's not a not a vehicle.
It's considered machinery, so even
That's
though
good.
it rides on a truck chassis, it's considered machinery because it actually performs an actual function besides just driving down the road.
Okay.
And so
Yeah, Lucy?
excuse me, Mother. So the sweeper, that's just one sweeper for $265, correct?
Correct.
Brooms would
You
be
thinking of getting
cheaper.
one for the house, Lucy?
I don't know where that went.
Each of you change your district, get the brooms out, get the
Clean my
family
house.
involved, and start working.
Lucy wants one at the house.
She wants one for her driveway, her hall.
My favorite.
Oh, my gosh.
Okay.
Next up, Mayor, we are budgeting for the amount that was approved by both the Development Corporation and City Council for assistance, both with the Bradford storm recovery, and if then funds are still available citywide. That amount is $636,000.
Now, stop.
Yes,
So where are we on qualifying people? I mean, it's a lot of money. What are we doing to qualify? What's the time frame? What's the process? What are we doing?
Mayor, that would be something Bob Saltz would have to help us with. How about if we have Bob prepare a Friday memo and get that information all out?
How about we postpone this to the December 16th, 17th meeting, and we'll let him present then? It's too
Mayor,
much money to do
would-
it.
Would it be okay if we, perhaps if City Council would like to, we could approve it on first reading and then make a change to this on second reading if the City Council decides that they want to make that change?
I think it's a lot of money. I think we ought to have a presentation, City
We-
Council on it.
They
We
won't,
could put this
this
on.
isn't approved until second reading anyway, so we can satisfy your request for a presentation and keep this moving without delay. If you hear the presentation and you're happy, then on second reading, you can approve with the exception of this item, however you desire to approve
I
that.
would, I would ask City Clerk to put this item on regular agenda after Bob's presentation. That way you're well aware of everything before we make an approval or of authority for this budget amendment.
Is council okay with that?
Yes.
That's good.
Okay.
Okay, next up, we're moving into a list of our carryover budget amendments. So these are projects that were either already planned or in process at the end of the year but had not yet been completed. So the departments are asked to submit carryover requests to the Finance Department. We will review those with the city manager, and then, of course, we need to bring them to City Council for approval because they will come from, technically from the fund balances that have posted at the end of 2019, but again, they were projects either in process or planned at the end of the year. So the first up we have is for city clerk. That is to help cover the cost of the 2 elections that we'll have this year, I guess, in place of 1 that we normally budget for. And then we have $33,000 requested from facility maintenance. That would be for wooden roll-down doors in the east mezzanine area to cover the portion that it would cover the kitchen area and the east mezzanine. So it'd have a wooden roll-down door. And Ron Lewis is here if you have any questions on that project. GIS is requesting $9,000 for a new data server.
And all these things are things that we discussed in last
Already
year's
approved.
budget, but they're just carryovers, so they're not new expenses.
We either discussed them in last year's budget or city manager was aware of these projects that were in process. Again, as I said, we've reviewed all of this with city manager. And so, yes, by one or the other authorities, they've been approved and were in process at your end.
The key
Does
is
the traffic signal go over that?
you're on the right track. The key is, in order for those to be approved in the new year, to move them from last year to the new year, they require your approval.
Okay. And the traffic signal detention, do we have a time frame on that in terms of when it's going to be done?
As far as the process, I would ask Shane to come up
Shane,
and address
yeah.
that.
Mayor, if you
Yes,
could
ma'am.
remind me of what that is as well, in
Please
addition to your question.
describe it and then talk about it. Time frame.
Okay. On the traffic signal detection upgrades, we have 2 license agreements or communications agreements that we're going to renew for a 5-year term with these funds, as well as improve 4 intersections with our grid smarts with the new camera detection systems. We have some warning flasher upgrades that we're going to go to solar instead of the ones that we actually have on electric meters right now, trying to continue to convert all of those over to solar. We have some pedestrian signal countdown timers that we need to replace in the downtown area, get those to where they're actually compliant. And then also continue our battery backup program to get all of our signalized intersections over onto a battery backup system, so when we do lose power for whatever reason, that they will continue, those actual intersections will continue to work until AEP has a chance to get the power back on, which greatly assists our PD department, because they get, as soon as the power goes down and intersections go out, they get called out, trying to send officers to every intersection that's in blackout mode. So that will help us on that. As far as soon as, if this is approved this time and again in December, as soon as those, we're ready to requisition POs. We have all the quotes. We have everything ready to go. We're ready to requisition. So normally about 4 to 6 weeks for delivery of the battery backups, and all the other components will be less than 6 weeks. And as soon as we get them in, we'll start actually installing them on, our crews will actually go out and start installing them. So as soon as we get final approval and POs, within 6 weeks, we should start installing everything.
Just to clarify, so the public is not confused, when you first started talking about cameras at the lights, we do not have the cameras that record your license plate if you ran the red light, right?
No.
We do not have that program in place, because
No.
there are some people who think we have that program in place.
No.
We do not have
These-
that program in place.
No. And I believe the state legislature even passed legislation this last year that outlaws those within the state of Texas.
Agreed. I just want to make it public.
And we
so
do
we all
not,
know.
when we do not record, those are not
Retroactive to
recorded.
the
We don't.
tickets I've gotten before?
They are for detection only. There's no recording devices on them. We do not record them. So, I mean, we have the capability to record them if we need to for certain reasons, but there are no recordings at all. So it's simply for detection.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Shane.
Mayor, one
Yes,
other
sir.
thing. I'm not sure of the scale of your question. Shane has specific projects for these dollars, but Shane, this doesn't get us anywhere near upgrading our signalized intersections across the city. Is that correct? That's a perpetual project.
Correct. We're still working with these dollars. We're still working on trying to get all of our cabinets upgraded to bring the technology components up to basically up to today's standards within
within the signal world. And also, as we look forward in our CIP process, we do have a rather large amount out there for signalized intersection replacements in the tune of about $22 million that we need to look at, because we do have some signalized or signals that are out there on these intersections that are 35 and 40 and 45 years old, and so they have outlived their lifespan. And so we've placed that in the CIP so we can start thinking about that as we move into the future. First, actually start replacing these older mast arms and poles. So,
Mayor, the reason I wanted to bring that up is they are eternally scraping for savings to address these issues, and I would expect we would see something to carry over savings to deal with signal issues for years to come. As long as they're scraping for savings to handle these things, we'll see something like this again next year. So
Well, I
didn't
think
wanna
what we
leave-
have to have is a plan that says priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, priority 4, what are the priorities? Because it is a fact that we will not have $22 million in any one single year. And so the reality is how do we address the problem on a timely basis and with fiscal responsibility? So we have to have a game plan. And I know you all know that.
Well, the key is I didn't want to leave you with the impression that you wouldn't see something like this again next year. That as long as they're scraping to gather the savings and deal with address some of those priorities, we're going to see this again.
Thank you very much.
Street and Bridge, and again, this is another one of Shane's, has requested to carry over $1.4 million. That's the money that they had left from this year's budget, and they would request to carry that over to do more street and bridge maintenance applications, of course. Parks has requested almost $29,000 for installation of new gas lines from their headquarters building. Recreation has requested carry over $5,000 for transportation fees from the school district. And as well, they've requested to carry over $150,000 for air conditioner replacements at Carl Ray and Southside Recreation gyms.
And these are all carryovers, no new expenses. No new expenses. These are carryovers from the existing 2018, 2019
These were savings
budget.
that they had in 2019
Savings.
that they're asking to use now in 2020.
Yes, Harry.
Just a real quick clarification. That last entry on the Carl Ray and Southside Rec Gym air conditioning, they don't have air conditioning today, do they? No, so these are not replacements. These are brand new. Yeah, to bring these things up to the standards. My understanding is at one time this year we had a citizen that was watching his grandson play some kind of sports inside, and they had to take him outside to get him some air. It was so hot in there. So
replacement is the wrong word, is what you're saying. It's brand new.
Carl
Well, it's a
confirms that
replacement
it
of
is
an old
new.
one with a new one. That would be called replacement, right?
We're going to put air conditioning in there.
Yes. Yeah. We're going to cool it down.
Thank you, sir.
Old equals 0. New. Okay.
Okay, Animal Service has 2 requests, one to carry over almost $19,000 to assist with their spay-neuter release pilot program, and the other for supplies that they had ordered but are on back orders. So they're needing to carry over the funds to cover that when those supplies do come in. Fire has requested to carry over almost $96,000 for Microsoft software and hardware upgrades. I'm told that this will help them get into compliance with the new HIPAA and CGIS requirements that are there for them.
That was obviously also planned for past years. So again, if we need to do it, let's get her done. I mean, if it's that important, let's get it done.
Okay. State Office Building has some money left in their capital account. They're requesting to carry those funds over for a number of improvements and repairs, including paint, carpet, flooring, HVAC, et cetera. If you have any additional questions on that, I think Carl's here.
And there was, none of that money was money that was going to be used for improvement at Fort Concho?
That's correct. That's already been allocated.
Okay.
Airport's requesting to carry over $10,000 for a deductible for insurance for a new roof out in the airport properties. Water has requested to carry over $12,000 for a vehicle upfit. This is for a vehicle that has already been purchased, but they need to put all of the I guess, install all of the upfit equipment onto that vehicle, both in water and water reclamation. And then the Development Corporation is requesting to carry over $178,000, which is money left in their future projects account, and they're just requesting to carry that over so that they can use it for incentives in the new year.
All right, what are we doing with the money that Caltech has chosen to give back? Was that budgeted in the 2018-2019 budget, and does that need to be included in this future projects, that dollar amount to carry forward?
We review those financial statements with the Development Corporation and finance staff on a monthly basis, and when they tell us that a project incentive has decreased and they can show us contractual proof of that, we go ahead and reduce that budget in the project account and then put that remaining expenditure back into the future projects account so that they have it available for use for different incentives.
All right, we've already approved it, so what's the time frame on bringing it forward?
It won't have to come to council, and when they present a contract, an amended contract, that contract will be the basis for an internal budget amendment to reduce that and just put it in future projects, which is non-committed.
Okay, thank you.
And I believe that concludes my budget amendment.
Do we need a motion to approve as presented? May I have a motion?
So moved.
Tommy made the motion and Harry seconded it. Do I have public comment at this point? No public comment. We'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Motion passes 7-0. Before we move into the closed session, I want to bring one thing forward under follow-up and administrative issues. Because there is public still here, and that's item B, discussion, consideration of December meeting schedule. I am asking if council would support only one meeting in December, and that meeting being December 17th as our only meeting in December. Do I have support for that in a motion?
Lots of support.
Yes, ma'am.
Tom, okay. A motion and a second by Lucy. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So we'll have one meeting in December. That meeting will be on December the 17th. And at this point in time, we will go into our closed session. A closed session, executive session under the provision of Government Code Title V, Open Government Ethics, Subtitle 8, Open Government. Chapter 551, Open Meetings, Subchapter D, Exceptions to Requirement that Meetings be open under the following sections. A, Section 551.071, 2, consult with attorney when the governmental body seeks the advice of its attorney on a matter in which the duty of the attorney to the governmental body under the Texas Disciplinary Rules of Professional Conduct of the State Bar of Texas clearly conflicts with this chapter regarding West Texas Water Partnership. And B, Section 551.0711A, consult with attorney when the governmental body seeks the advice of its attorney about pending or contemplated litigation regarding Sheila Andrews versus the City of San Angelo. And item C, Section 551.0711A, consult with attorney when the governmental body seeks the advice of its attorney about pending or contemplated litigation regarding H.R. Wardlow, Beverly Stribling, Lawrence A. Ritchie versus the City of San Angelo. And then that concludes. We will adjourn for closed session at 10:16. We will be back 11 a.m. to complete the meeting. Thank you very much. a.m. On the follow-up and administrative issues, A, consider items discussed in closed session. There are none to be disclosed, so we will move on. We've already done item B, and on item C, I think, Rick, you wanted to make an announcement.
Yes, we were talking about future agenda items, and on that one, John is here as well, but John and Daniel and I have been discussing some training opportunities that might be beneficial for the council and the planning commission. We've talked a lot about development, opportunities, how to make that better, infill, all that kind of stuff. We've worked with a company out of Austin that does some training that's really, we think, could be beneficial. So we wanted to see if there was a date that we could come up with council that you might be available to spend a half a day jointly with the planning commission on a training. So we thought this might be a good time to see if we can come up with a time. One date that is available we know of was the January 14th, because your work session is the 28th.
28th, correct.
I don't know if the 14th is an option, but if not,
Now,
that's fine.
who are we paying what for on this?
John, do you want to speak a little bit about the company?
Because one of the things I want to make sure we do is we tend to do these things in a vacuum, and the most important part for me is bringing developers, builders into the conversation, because they're the ones who are actually out there doing it, and it's pretty easy to
Can I ask
work
this?
in a vacuum. So hold on one second. So I want to make sure that whatever we do, it's not in a vacuum, and I'd like to understand from the development community what the issues are first before we pay somebody else to come in. Yes, Lane?
It would be easier for me to be guaranteed to sneak away after the baby's born. Because January 16th is due date. So I don't want to miss this just in case.
And if we're going down the path, I am out of town on January the 28th, so.
Yeah, we'll have to take a look at that again as far as the
Okay.
planning session, so.
Well, it looks like the only opportunity then is the week of, let's say, the Thursday, the 23rd.
Can you go into
22nd?
Can you go into
It does not have
February?
to be
It could be
January.
later.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it can definitely be later.
February is a no deal, and I'm quite sure Tom Thompson would tell you that.
Oh, that's
So
right.
it's not going to be an option in February, so the issue is, and again, what are we getting from these people that we're bringing in from the outside, for what reason?
They're a group that focuses on the fiscal impacts of development, and so looking at, we always talk about things like street maintenance costs and those sorts of things, and they talk about issues like encouraging certain types of development versus other types of development that have different impacts on water, sewer, roads.
I know, but the development community is going to develop what it's in their package of what they do. I mean, what are we going to do? Say no to this one, say yes to this? I mean, we need development, so we're not going to be picking winners and losers in terms of who is or isn't going to be approved for development.
Well, it sort of gets back to Councilwoman DeWitt's question earlier on the annexation. In other cities, they've seen developments that the property taxes from development don't even pay the road maintenance costs, much less police and fire and parks.
Yeah,
and
but
all
they
of the
play
other-
jobs, and those jobs spend sales tax dollars. So, I mean,
This comes down to, we have gone to some of the training. We went to one in Lubbock, I believe, and we felt it was very beneficial. If it's not something the council wants to commit time to, and that's kind of why we're here today, is to ask whether that is something, we felt it would be beneficial for the planning commission and the council, and it kind of gets everybody kind of on the same mindset about what sort of, you'll have things coming to you from planning commission, and gets everybody on the same playing field on what our thoughts are. But if you don't have time for it, it's not something you want to do, then we can certainly just not do it.
to me, it's unnecessary, and I don't want having meetings, outside people coming in, and then all of a sudden the planning commission going, well, I don't know if we need to do that, because I don't know if it's going to bring anything to the table. Development brings things to the table, whether it's jobs, property tax, sales tax. Development takes property from a zero base to an incremental level. But Harry, what were you going to say?
Well, from my perspective, I've been to one or two of these on my time with the council, And having people come in, I think is an opportunity for us to take a look at things from a different perspective. So if we're going to be able to save taxpayers' money by doing something, thinking a little bit different out of the box, then I say if we can get the people together, let's do it.
How would we be saving the citizens' taxpayer dollars?
Mayor, how about we do this? Let's put a packet together, send it to city council members on a Friday. You review it, and we can decide whether this is something that's beneficial or not. Okay,
Got it.
let's do that instead.
Perfect. Okay,
And we might put some proposed, y'all can decide on that, we may put some proposed dates in there that are farther off, like in March, when maybe people, and y'all can review those if you're inclined to do it, and then tell us, yes, we want to do it, or no, we don't, or
Okay.
if we do, here's the dates.
great idea. Do I have a motion
Mayor,
for,
I have-
yes?
Just please, before we do that, I've got one item that I want to make sure that we bring to a future council meeting. Lucy and I have had some conversation with a few citizens over the last few weeks about dead wild animals on their property. And the ordinance really says that if animal control comes out and picks it up, then they're going to charge that particular resident that fee. And I'd like to get to a spot, if it's a wild animal, that we look at ways that we can change the ordinance so that we're not charging those people. We don't know whether those animals are sick, what the issue is with them and why they died on a specific individual's property. So I want to have some further conversation about that and see whether or not we can get to a
Yes,
spot.
because there was a dead deer on Avenue D for 4 days that I'm sure no one wanted to pick up because someone was going to have to foot the bill.
Well, but it
So
was
the
on-
flies gathered.
It was actually on the road on Abe, wasn't it? And
No, it was on Avenue D off of Abe. It was
Okay.
by the parking lot behind the church.
I've had 3 in District 1 literally in the last 3 weeks, so it's a timely
deer
discussion.
season.
I'd make a motion, we adjourn.
That's, and I think there's no one in opposition.
Everybody's ready to get out of here.